Thank you. It's great to be here today to introduce the Mayor and to get to the chance to speak to you all about an issue that's very close to our hearts. At Asthma and Lung UK, we're fighting for everyone's right to breathe, wherever they live. Every day, we hear from people with lung conditions about the struggles they face in trying to do something that many of us take for granted, breathing. Lung conditions can impact any of us at different points of our lives. We all know someone with asthma, a condition which can limit people's breathing when set off by something in the air. And now, for example, over 1 million of us are having to learn to live with a brand new lung condition, long COVID. More than 500,000 people across London are currently living with a lung condition, and air pollution is putting them at risk of a life-threatening flare-up if they have a condition like asthma or COPD. We hear from people every day who are forced to stay indoors when pollution levels are high, trapped in their own homes and scared that breathing unsafe air could cause them to be hospitalised. We also know that air pollution puts us all at greater risk of developing a lung condition. It can stunt the growth of children's lungs, and it makes us more susceptible to worse lung health. Just like we don't expect to drink dirty water, we shouldn't be expecting people to breathe dirty air. But that's what's happening. The good news, however, is that we have the solutions. We just need to make change happen. The Mayor has made tackling toxic air a key priority, and as a result, change is happening much faster in London than in other cities. In the last few years, the Mayor has set about improving awareness of the impact of air pollution on our health, delivering the most comprehensive air pollution monitoring network in the country, and implementing policies that we've long been calling for as a charity designed to clean up the air. The expansion of the ultra-low emission zone last October is delivering really fantastic results already, ensuring that we have fewer polluting cars on our roads, and it's no doubt saving lives. We all now know far more about the dangers of air pollution than we once did, and communities across the city are taking direct action. At Asthma and Lung UK, we have been working with schools, with youth groups and young people across the country to help them call for tougher action to clean up the air near where they live, learn and play. For example, we supported a number of groups to go to COP26 to show leaders the impact that air pollution is having on young lungs, in addition to the harm that it's causing the planet. We've supported people to lobby central government for stronger legal targets to drive down levels of pollution. And we've spent the last year sharing stories from huge numbers of people to galvanise action around the interconnected challenges of air pollution and climate change. Slowly but surely, people are claiming their right to breathe. But we cannot be complacent. The scale of the challenge is vast, and we're only now starting to chip away at it. Everyone across London is being exposed to toxic air. The damage is already being done, so it's only together that we can make any chance, or we have any chance of tackling it. This has to be about getting the dirtiest vehicles off our road in the quickest time possible. We at Asthma and Lung UK want London to be the safest place for people to live, to work and play, where everyone can breathe without the fear of damaging their lungs. And so I'm delighted to introduce the Mayor today to outline how he's planning to make this a reality. Welcome, Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, it's good to be here. It's a privilege, in fact, to join you at Forest Hill School this morning. It's great to see the chair of the all-party parliamentary group, Helen Hayes, the Mayor of Lewisham, the coolest mayor in this school, Damien Egan here as well. It's good to see members of the Assembly, Leonie Cooper, Zach Plansky and Sakina Sheikh, many councillors here as well from across London. It's good to see the Assistant General Secretary of the Trade Union Unite, here as well today. Can I begin by thanking Sarah for that introduction and for all the important work she's doing as Chief Executive of Asthma and Lung UK. I also want to thank your head teacher, Mr. Sullivan, Michael Sullivan, for agreeing to host us today, and of course for Gabriel for kicking things off this morning. I had one ask from Mr. Sullivan: make sure the student is a rubbish speaker to make me look good. He failed. You were great. Let's show them all our appreciation, please, by a big round of applause. We also have with us the Executive Director from C40, which represent almost 100 cities across the globe, and also the Chief Executive of Centre for London. He would say the best think tank in our city. I know Forest Hill prides itself not only on academic success, but on the positive contribution pupils make to society. I understand you're currently the only school in London with Stonewall Gold status for your commitment to inclusion and celebrating LGBTQ+ students, a magnificent achievement. I also hear you regularly hold coffee mornings for charity with more cake and much less booze than at a Downing Street party. So well done, and thank you for everything you do for your community and our city. I always enjoy talking to students about the environment because your passion and your sense of what's possible is unconstrained by received wisdom. Of course, when it comes to the climate crisis, you have the most at stake because it's your future that's on the line. And the same is true for air pollution. When I became mayor in 2016, I acted straight away to start bringing down emissions so that we could clean up our air and play our part in tackling the climate crisis. One of the most important steps we took was introducing the world-leading ultra-low emission zone, which requires vehicles to meet the toughest emission standards enforced by any major city in the world. Its impact has been nothing short of transformative. Millions more Londoners are now breathing cleaner air every day, and in central London, it's helped to cut some harmful pollutants by almost a half, reduce carbon emissions by more than 6%, and take nearly 50,000 of the most polluting vehicles off our roads. The ULEZ shows that when the political will is there and the right policies are put in place, we can take big strides forward. And combined with the fivefold increase in cycle lanes we've delivered, our introduction of more than 700 zero-emission buses, and our efforts to get more Londoners using public transport, cycling and walking, it undoubtedly moved us closer to our goal of a cleaner, greener city. However, despite the enormous progress we've made, the job is far from finished. Our city still faces a treacherous triple threat from air pollution, the climate crisis, and congestion. Let's take these one at a time. Air pollution. Even though we've come a long way in London with our groundbreaking policies, the air around this school, like the air around every other school in our city, is still in breach of the new updated World Health Organization's guidelines for nitrogen dioxide and PM 2.5 particles. Why does this matter? Well, nitrogen dioxide is so toxic it poisons us. It causes and exacerbates respiratory problems, and it reacts with other chemicals in the air to form particulate matters like PM 2.5. These are tiny particles that are so small they can weave their way deep down into our lungs and even enter our bloodstream. They trigger a whole host of illnesses from lung cancer and heart disease to asthma and emphysema. These dangerous pollutants ought make our air an invisible killer, leading to the early deaths of more than 4,000 Londoners every year. And this problem is affecting Londoners from cradle to grave. We see children being diagnosed with life-changing conditions like stunted lungs, and older Londoners at greater risk of developing dementia and other conditions later in life. Some of you will be familiar with the story of Ella, Adu, Kissy, Deborah, whose mother, Rosamond, is with us here today. Ella was a 9-year-old girl who lived in this borough by the busy South Circular Road. She died in 2013 following several asthma attacks. At the second inquest into Ella's death, the coroner concluded that pollution from passing vehicles made, and I quote, a material contribution to her death. Ella's loss has starkly illustrated the invisible menace of our polluted air and has only strengthened my resolve to continue tackling this danger head-on. What makes this crisis all the more scandalous and a question of racial and social justice is that it's minority communities and the poorest Londoners who are least likely to own a car who are being hit hardest. The policies we've already implemented will prevent around 1 million more Londoners from being admitted to hospital by 2050. However, even with these improvements, if no additional steps are taken, more than 500,000 Londoners are likely to develop diseases attributable to air pollution over the next 30 years. The cumulative cost of this to our NHS and social care sector is predicted to be around £10.5 billion. This demonstrates in the clearest terms why the cost of inaction far outweighs the cost of action. The same is true for the climate emergency, which the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, warned earlier this week could lead to large parts of our planet becoming uninhabitable. I'm incredibly proud of the far-reaching action that London has already taken to address this threat, action that includes significant ongoing investment in green jobs and skills. But as a new report showed earlier this year, if we're to hit our target of becoming net zero by 2030, we need to be going much further, much faster. You know, between 2000 and 2018, London achieved a 57% reduction in workplace CO2 emissions, a 40% reduction in emissions from homes, but just a 7% reduction in transport emissions. And it's this last area where we must now focus our energies. Because in order to achieve our net zero target, we need to reduce car traffic in London by at least 27% by the end of the decade. And this leads to our third challenge, tackling congestion. The average London driver spends 6 days sitting in traffic every year, 6 days. The cost of this to our economy is more than £5 billion annually. That's more than £1,200 per driver. So just as with air pollution and the climate crisis, the cost of congestion to our economy, health, and quality of life is something we simply can't afford. So what's the answer? Ultimately, the long-term and fairest solution to these challenges in London will be smart road user charging. This would allow us to scrap all the current schemes, such as the congestion charge and the ultra-low emission zone, and instead charge motorists depending on how much they drive and how clean their vehicles are. I've asked TfL, Transport for London, to start exploring how this concept could be developed. However, the reality is we're still many years away from being ready to implement such a scheme, and London can't wait. Lives are at stake. That's why I asked officials last year to present me with a range of bold policy options that we could take forward quickly. There were three distinct options. One, introduce a Greater London boundary charge for vehicles driving into London. Two, implement a low-level, daily clean air charge for all but the cleanest vehicles. Or three, extend the ultra-low emission zone beyond the north and south circular roads so that it covers the whole of Greater London. In weighing up these different proposals, the rising cost of living was a key consideration for me. Because at a time when people's budgets are under pressure, I'm not willing to ask people to pay more unless I'm absolutely convinced it's justified to save lives and protect the health of Londoners. My preference is always going to be for an approach that has the biggest effect on emissions and congestion and the smallest impact on Londoners' wallets. This means striking a balance. And it means assessing the benefits of each of the proposals relative to the potential financial impact on Londoners as a whole. With this in mind, and having examined the science, studied the data, and carefully considered the wider economic context, I can announce today that I propose to extend the ultra-low emission zone to cover Greater London in 2023, subject to consultation. The ULEZ is highly effective at getting the most polluting vehicles off our streets, and extending it to the whole of London would lead to a further reduction of around 10% in emissions from cars and vans in outer London, would further reduce the most polluting cars on our roads by between 20,000 and 40,000 per day, and would have the biggest impact in outer London, where we know we need to reduce toxic emissions the most. A recent report by Imperial College found that the greatest number of deaths attributable to air pollution are in outer London boroughs. This is mainly due to the high proportion of older Londoners in these areas who are susceptible to the harmful impacts of our toxic air. It's only right and fair that those residents living in outer London can enjoy cleaner air and reap the same health benefits from the ULEZ as those in inner and central London. It's also wrong that children attending school on one side of this borough get to breathe cleaner air thanks to the ULEZ, but children on this side, where this school is, are forced to inhale more toxic fumes because they are outside the ULEZ area. These proposals for extending the ULEZ, which will be subject to public and stakeholder consultation, mean I can also rule out both the clean air charge and the Greater London boundary charge. Although a London-wide ULEZ is clearly the best approach, it's still far from being an easy decision to make. It will be politically unpopular in some quarters, and yet I passionately believe it's the right course of action, and for me, it's a matter of principle. It took decades before action was taken to protect children from toxic cigarette smoke. And I'm not willing to make the same mistakes by turning a blind eye to evidence showing the health impacts of toxic air pollution at the same time as the world stares down the barrel of a climate catastrophe. Cities are the climate doers, not the delayers. And on my watch, we'll walk the walk, not just talk the talk, putting London on course for a cleaner, greener, and healthier future. But we'll do so in a fair and balanced way. We won't leave people behind. Instead, we'll prioritise a just transition, ensuring that the burden doesn't fall on those who are least able to bear it. In practical terms, this means helping Londoners most in need of support to adapt to the extended London-wide ULEZ. I'm pleased to also announce today we'll commit to the biggest scrappage scheme feasible, learning from previous experience to help motorists in outer London swap their more polluting vehicles for cleaner models or cleaner means of transport. We'll also be investing more in making walking, cycling and the use of public transport easier. And I'm calling on the government to provide extra support for a scrappage scheme in London like they're doing for other cities around the country. Let me end by saying this. I truly believe that every Londoner should have the right to breathe clean air, and that getting to grips with the climate crisis is the defining issue of our time. Thinking about the gravity of the challenges that confront us today, I'm reminded of a quote that I first heard when I was at school. It goes like this: "Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree today." For me, its relevance is explained by the fact that if we're honest, we don't know if national leaders will step up and make the difficult decisions that are required to protect our planet and its people. But what we do know is that here in London, we can control how we respond. We can choose to plant our tree. We can choose to summon the moral courage that this moment demands of us, and we can choose to act on our convictions in the knowledge that we can make a difference. That's what I'll always do as mayor, because that's who I am. But I also believe that's who we are as a city. London is progressive, forward-thinking, innately optimistic. And if we decide to take a bold lead, if we decide to go where others are unwilling to go, then our actions might just inspire others to follow our example. And suddenly, we might just find there are more doers than delayers out there. More people who are willing to put their head above the parapet rather than duck their responsibilities. So today, I've set out what I believe are the next steps for tackling the treacherous triple threat we face and delivering a cleaner, greener, healthier city. But reaching this goal isn't something I can do alone. It can only be achieved if charities, businesses, politicians, school students, sixth formers, and other Londoners, young and old, rich and poor, from all boroughs and backgrounds, stand together and insist that this is the future we want for our city. I sincerely hope you'll join me in this mission, so that years from now, when our young people, our children, and generations to come look back and ask, what did London do when our planet was on the brink? We can say, we did our bit. We chose urgency over expediency, and we saw to it through the strength of our common endeavour that London wasn't just the greatest city in the world, but the greenest and most sustainable one too. The city that, to borrow Forest Hill School's motto, helped ensure we were aspiring to excellence together. Thank you.
It now falls to me as head teacher to bring proceedings to a close. On behalf of Forest Hill School and the Sydenham and Forest Hill Sixth Form community, that's students, staff, parents and governors, I'd like to thank the Mayor for visiting us today to make such a crucially important speech, setting out groundbreaking agenda to further reduce air pollution in our city. We clearly hold in common a desire to safeguard the health, well-being and life chances of all in our society, particularly young people. I'd also like to thank the assembled guests for attending, including our students, and wish all who will be leaving us soon a safe onward journey. Thank you.